Today we're talking about details that you have missed in the EA's Investor Day of 2024. There's a lot of interesting info that I want to reveal here because I saw some things I'm not too sure people have talked about yet. First of all, I want to talk about what they showcased in the investors calling with the AI tool they revealed. They were showing what looked to be the next Battlefield game and its foundation. Some of the guns that they had an M870 shotgun there, they had an M4A1, and they had players sprinting that didn't look like they had tactical sprint or sliding at all, which is a good thing for most players because we enjoyed the simplicity of just sprint back at Battlefield 4 and 3. Anyways, moving on. The thing I noticed with the soldier sprinting with the M4A1 above the other player was the shadow. The shadow looked like Frederick Bishop from Battlefield 1's war story, The Runner. What EA and DICE mentioned during the investors calling, this next game is going to be a connected Battlefield experience. Now, I mentioned this in my previous video back in September, but I thought, and I still feel this way, that this next Battlefield game or this new experience that they're bringing in, that is what they're calling the connected Battlefield experience, is all the Battlefield games amalgamated into one. It's a mixture of one. You basically connect and play Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, Battlefield 3, and 4 all together, even 2042 perhaps. If you noticed in the shadow, now the reason why I say this looks like Frederick Bishop from the Runner war story campaign in Battlefield 1 is because you can see his cap, looks like the Australian cap that he wore, and the cape. And if you look very closely, if you zoom in the video, which I'm going to show here, it looks very close to Frederick Bishop. Now, the gloves don't look anything alike what Frederick Bishop would have wore back in World War I because he's actually based off of a true soldier during the Gallipoli campaign. But this footage right here tells me this connected experience is going to be what I always thought was all the Battlefields connected together to play into one. Also, we got more intel about the next Battlefield game from our awesome leaker that leaks details about Battlefield especially. And it was also reported in the Insider Gaming article. They mentioned the game will take place somewhere between 2027 and 2030, and the campaign will be focused on a massive private military going up against NATO. That's very interesting because NATO is the majority of Europe with the US. So that tells me we might play as both perspectives perhaps for the next campaign because Motive and Criterion are helping work on the campaign together. Criterion's also helping DICE with the multiplayer, whilst Ripple Effect is focusing on the new free-to-play Battle Royale that Tom Henderson leaked in his recent details. Now, I mentioned in the article, it ties in with the game's premium release. Now, a premium, when I think of a game's premium release, I think of like an exclusive. So perhaps premium is coming back or we're still getting live service. I bet you we're going to get live service. We're not going to go back to premium. I think every game from here on is going to move forward and stay with live service. I just hope they stay consistent with it. They did pretty well with Battlefield 2042, although Season 7 and 6 were far stretched between Season 5 from Season 1. So I hope it looks good from here on. Battlefield 5 was pretty bad with the live service for a while there until Year 2 came around for the Pacific Theater, which was great, by the way. They also mentioned they wanted to dive into some of the nitty-gritty details that players might want to hear. To start off, let's focus on the core of the game. The developers of the next Battlefield game are aiming to have 45 different weapons on launch, which is a good sign. We only had, I think, 21, 23 day one for Battlefield 2042. In addition, the goal is for around 10 multiplayer maps. Adding to these details, their goal is to shoot for 10 multiplayer maps around that number for the launch of the next Battlefield game. They're overhauling Destruction, and the article reveals that they're bringing back Levolution, which I'm very happy about. Levolution was a big part of Battlefield 4 for me, especially, and a lot of the community. And it mentions over half a dozen sources will bring caliber-based destruction. Depending on the caliber you're shooting with, is going to have a different impact shooting through walls, which we also seen in the Battlefield 5 reveal trailer. There will be some changes to movement in the game, they mention, and there's multiple sources that you could pick up and move down players in the new Battle Royale experience and in multiplayer. The only game where you could pick up down players and put them over your shoulder is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Although that system was very clunky at first, I hope Battlefield capitalizes on that system or improves on it and makes it unique to its own stance. It mentions it's been applied that this is all of the changes and is part of the team's quote-unquote Battlefield moments. It's also an incentive to bring back those moments that make Battlefield. The teams have been carrying out mass surveys. I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but this Battlefield game is supposed to be the largest playtested game in the Battlefield franchise, and they're starting early next year. So it's already been playtested within the studio. Now it's going to be spread across for us to play. Tom Henderson mentions there's not going to be a beta for this next Battlefield game, but instead a CTE. Whereas in the beta, you're limited with the amount of maps you play, the amount of guns you use, and the fundamentals of the game entirely. So having a CTE is the best choice for this next Battlefield game because we could play across the entire Battlefield game throughout its time span of development. As I mentioned, they're still deciding on the name for this next Battlefield game. I remember Vincent Pilla mentioning they either want it to be Battlefield 2025, Battlefield, or Battlefield 6. And like I mentioned, this is going to be a large-scale community-driven testing environment for the game. And my guess is Ripple Effect, which used to be named DICE LA, is going to focus on the Battlefield CTE since they did in the past with Battlefield 4 and 1. If you don't know what a CTE stands for, it's Community Test Environment, where a good margin of the community, depending on the platform you play, is allowed to play content in development, meaning you have early access to play this content and it's not going to be fully finished, but you could give your feedback towards the developers on what they can improve on in certain areas. Battlefield CTEs in the past were built for PC at first, but then spread across Xbox and PlayStation eventually. As I mentioned before, we know Ripple Effect is focusing on the next Battle Royale experience as supposedly to be free to play, from what Tom Henderson leaked out to the community. And there's supposedly developers in the making of this next Battle Royale experience for Battlefield that were also involved with Call of Duty Warzone. Knowing there are some Raven Software and Call of Duty Warzone developers now in Ripple Effect that's making the next Battle Royale for Battlefield, you might see some things that are related to Call of Duty Warzone, especially for the first iteration of that Battle Royale for Call of Duty. We already know Battlefield's returning to its core 64 player count for a more focused all-out warfare experience and a more back-to-basics approach. And some more to mention to go about this footage that we've seen about the AI tool that they're bringing into Battlefield, supposedly, is the way the player throws the grenades, and perhaps that's an early development. The detail of the weapons as well look very gritty, which is what we want in the next Battlefield game. The weapons for Battlefield 2042 look too clean for the environment that Battlefield 2042 was based off of and going for. And it looks like the gloves from the other player that's holding the M870 shotgun has gloves relating to Falk, that was the combat medic, or combat grandma we call her, in Battlefield 2042. So let me know what you guys think about these new details I mentioned that some of us have missed or haven't noticed yet or talked about for the next Battlefield game. 2025 is coming very shortly, and I hope we get some more insight on the next Battlefield game early next year and hopefully get word on when we can have that community tested environment that we can have access to. Please leave a like in this video, comment down below what was interesting to you about all these details I mentioned. Subscribe if you're new. I love you all and I'll see you all soon. Peace.